Are you leveraging your CVP surveys? Today I'm chatting with Stacey McQueen and Pamela Cole about why CVP surveys are so important and how you can use them to your advantage. I'm Kathy Munoz, US CEM Operations Manager. Welcome to Spotlight on CEM. Stacey, tell us a little bit about the customer viewpoint surveys. Why do we have them and why they're so important?
Customer viewpoint is the actual event that takes place in the relationship building process between the dealer and the customer. It literally takes us from the on-site experience, from the time they say hello, and to the full service experience or sales experience and when they actually close a deal.
And so why are they so important? Why is there a lot of emphasis on the CVP, as we call it for short?
Well, because it's really the only channel that the dealers have to really get inside the customer, as far as like what the true perception was. So if the process is, there's a breakdown, or if there's something to highlight, a best practice of some kind, there's always that element that a dealer can really take and hone in on some of the things that could actually breed more of a profound culture within the store that really shows them to put their best foot forward. And here's why.
And Pamela, from a coach perspective, working with your stores, how do you support your stores?
Oh, well, I want to go back and quote a GM a couple of years ago when he said to me in one of my first visits, he said, I pretty much know how to run the business. And, it runs well, except I have there's only two places of pain that I have. So I'm waiting. I've waited a long time to find out what are the two things. And he said, the customers and the team members. And, everything else is pretty straightforward. So, and that's where I focus working with my stores with CEM, is on that relationship between the customers and the team members, and particularly using the customer verbatims. I love to do it, the stories they tell, and then moving that into some questions, particularly now working more and more into trust behaviors. So first of all, was this a transaction failure, process failure? Not getting a call back, not having something with scheduling right, not the part not being there, the courtesy vehicle or loaner or a rental not being about, all of those process questions? Or was it a relational failure? Didn't feel listened to, was standing there and nobody greeted me, had a defensive response when I asked some questions about my repair, or about, why the vehicle was priced the way it was, or any of those. And so looking at that and then moving to the next part when talking with managers and team members is, how could we do this differently? What would language look like? And we've been doing that a lot in the last 3 years. What would a response that sounded like empathy be? How could the customer feel that we care about them at least as much as we care about ourselves?
Pamela, I think the work that you're doing, I know, on the breaking it down into those two buckets, deep diving what those comments are, and helping whoever you're in front of, the dealer, the management team, who's ever responsible for supporting the customer, and their mind being able to kind of determine, where do I need to spend my time? I think that's absolutely fantastic.
I was so excited when I heard you start to speak, because I'm like, oh my God, finally. And I hear it a different way, because I don't look at numbers like that. I don't look at that the process is being driven by money. When you express the first piece of it is that you're telling me that it's not always about what you're doing wrong. It's about what you're doing right as well. And that's when you can actually feed from those things and take it on to another level.
Great.
Right. And Stacey, you were talking about the tight linkage with how the employee is feeling about the dealership and how that's communicated directly to the customer. And we all have had experiences where the customer facing person really should have gotten another job. In our first experience is, I'd much rather be dealing with somebody else other than this person, because they don't seem to be engaged. And from the beginning, tying this into the specific outcomes, we're still looking for the same business outcomes we've been looking for in the 30 plus years I've been working in automobile retail automobile, because it's about, increased revenues, selling more vehicles, servicing more vehicles, selling more parts. It's about customer retention. We all know that data's in that those are the most profitable transactions. It's about reputation. So not only looking at what's going on in CVP and being reported, but what's going on in all the social media representations for the dealership. So that's another conversation we get in, and what is similar, and what are people feeling hot enough about that they are willing to post, either positively or negatively. So, but that's what builds that, the same metrics we've been looking for all along, which is, retention and profitability. But the difference is that we're focusing on the relationship through which we are building this.
So Stacey, given what Pamela shared around, identifying feedback verbatim from CVP and also social media, you're like the keeper of all of this amazing data. You see it from on high, you have a high level bird's eye view. Are you noticing any trends in the customer feedback?
I would say that from a positive perspective, it's amazing the resilience that our people have. Before, even though Ford ignited a lot of the initiatives immediate, those dealerships were already there. And I don't think they do themselves justice by getting enough credit for the amount of camaraderie that they have together. But the relationships that were built throughout a time like this, from the verbatims that have come in from these customers, the appreciation level, again, it almost gives me goosebumps, because I'm actually thinking about how fun they are to hear people that I don't even know of. These people are speaking of the employees that are inside the dealerships. And I expect nothing less from them, because every Ford engagement I've ever been to or have been involved in, there always comes a sense of companionship. I mean, you always know it's almost like driving down the street. When I was a zone manager, I was scared to death because I didn't know where the hell I was. And in the end, I just saw the Ford Blue Oval. And then I knew that my store was going to be there. Oh my God, I'm gonna cry.
Oh.
The point is that you'd be amazed at what you don't work as hard for becomes the forefront of why these people are coming back to you. It's not about really what you provide for them, but how you actually do it for them.
It sounds like the customers felt the trust from the dealers. They felt heard. It was about how the dealership made the customer feel, and that came through in the positive experiences they shared in the survey.
Yes. But it wasn't just about 2020. I mean, these were the same kind of things that we read before. It just became more prominent to pay more attention because we were all at a kind of a place. So, but that's kind of like, I've been in this position itself for almost 2 years. And even prior to 2020, when you see the comments of what's happening, a lot of times I actually think to myself, well, God, they're going to that store because of the person, because, everything else went sideways, right? So at the end of the day, I still think there's something out there that still everybody's, leads with their best foot forward with the right intention.
And so, Pamela, from what you're experiencing, when you're looking at these verbatims and you're helping a dealer understand, again, going back to those two buckets, transactional or relationship, what do you often see? Is there a trend you might see in an experience that was subpar?
Well, let me start by saying what Stacey was just talking about is the amount of forgiveness that I see for our failed process because the relationship was so strong. Where people are willing to, the story they're willing to tell themselves about why something happened is much more forgiving. So I know this is a great store. I know that they're really honest and they mean what they say. And this particular thing did not go well. So, there is forgiveness. Whereas in a store where there isn't a relationship or relationship has not been established, either there's been high turnover with the store team, or, well, frequently that's the biggest one, that there's no relationship established, then now we're dealing with a whole different trust equation. And so I'm not willing to give you the benefit of the doubt because there's no, we often talk about emotional credits as a bank account. There's no investment in this relationship. I don't have 3 other vehicles I've purchased from you in the past for other family members. I don't have, years of coming in for my regular service appointments. And people, trust will last if we have a bank account of it. So this is my one-time visit, and I'm judging you based on this one-time experience, and I'm not going to be very forgiving. That's just kind of the economics of the human response, emotional response system. So, and calling out those behaviors that really matter to customers, because, it's a transaction intense environment. So saying, what parts of the transaction do we do well, and that customers are calling out. They're saying, what I really liked about this was the way I was greeted promptly. What I really liked about this is I did not have to wait very long before someone brought me information, answered a question, got me what I needed. And then the relational side is, I felt like, and that's, one of the opening things is, I felt like they were trying to make this work for me. I felt like I had their support in getting a difficult transaction completed. I realized that they were tired and feeling stressed, and they stayed late to make sure this happened. So that's when we get real close to what is the human condition in terms of what's the relationship investment, and what are we willing to credit people for in that relationship investment.
One of the things that I love that you said had to do with making deposits in a bank account. The more you deposit, you're able to, you're building up an account that you can withdraw from. There's something there. I loved how you talked about that, Pamela, because it's so true. And that's true with brands and everything, all of what we as consumers spend our money on.
Can we make a withdrawal?
Go ahead.
We make a sizable withdrawal and not go bankrupt, and not break the bank. And so where there is no prior investment, then people are quick to say, yeah, I'm not coming back.
Exactly. That's beautiful. So, Stacey, we had a really great conversation, and I appreciate you taking the time with us and talking about the data you look at, what you see, how you feel. I love that little story about you as a new zone manager when you saw that Ford Oval, how it made you feel. I can relate to that it's just so, beautiful when that oval's there, you're in a safe place and you're with people who care. For CVP, there's a lot going on. What's new in CVP for 2021?
2021 is the kind of a transitional year as we continue to kind of like benchmark ourselves across the board and try to determine what is the real components that are going to help our dealers achieve what they're looking for. Building the relationships, trying to solidify some of those relationships by kind of taking a step back as a manufacturer, but kind of putting forth the things that the customers are saying and that the dealers can actually respond to. So one of the things that came out this year was incorporating the question that was related to the communication through the service channels. So which means that one of the things I think is important for you to explore or to understand as a whole is that we didn't take it as a typical, how did your service advisor communicate with you effectively? We took it as a team. So we approached the question as a standalone question to incorporate the relationship between the customer and the dealership, incorporating all customers themselves, like as if the employees are customers. We're all in this together. And so I think that what's important about this is utilizing the opportunities that we have to communicate from a bigger picture. Therefore, the question specifically came out by saying, I think it was, did your hometown Ford team communicate with you throughout the service event that you had? I can't remember exactly what the words are, but for the most part, the idea was that it could be the service advisor, it could be the technician passing to go get coffee in the waiting room. It could even be the receptionist or the cashier who checks you out. If you feel like you're taking it as a team and everybody treats everything like a team, you're one unit. We always preach about Ford being one Ford. The dealers are one dealer. So help each other out and try to like get to the same place without making it so internal ownership. Makes sense. So that was one thing. The other thing is we actually we're initiating some of the other launches, like for example, mobile service, trying to get the benefits of getting some of the intel to determine what services we can evaluate ourselves to become, because the customer verbatims are coming in at, they expect more for less, meaning they don't want to come to a store anymore. And we want them to come to stores. I mean, obviously the entire team has an opportunity to give a lot more, but in these situations, we need to offer the flexibility in what the environment is actually speaking to us on.
In the consumer experience movement, one of the benefits and a key benefit is having the coach in store, kind of looking after all this. And Pamela, you've done a great job kind of sharing what you do. As Stacey mentioned, there's some question changes. Is that going to affect how the store feels about the survey, or like, is there going to be, do you feel a mind shift or some extra work needs to be done from a coach perspective to help the store actually understand the change and what that means to the overall team, as Stacey shared?
Well, I think framing the value of it, of asking that question and having that information to the dealership in terms of, positive customer experience and, building customer retention and building customer sales. So that what we know is communication is a critical component of dissatisfaction or satisfaction. When I always like to say they've got three things to spend: time, money, and energy. But the one that costs a lot is energy. You can give me a refund, you can give me a coupon, but you can't give me my time and energy back. So when we look at this communication piece and we see how many ways from their feedback it interfered with their lives, caused them to miss a deadline, not get where they needed to get to, be waiting longer than they wanted to wait, that's a message. And then the number of times, and it says, and I didn't know what was going on.
Mm-hmm.
No one kept me informed.
Yeah.
So, and we have more and more ways to do that, and lots of examples of customer expectation. I live in a virtual world and I deal with virtual service delivery, and they do a great job of letting me know exactly where my groceries are. Mm-hmm. So that sets a customer expectation around, well, can't you keep me as informed? Mm-hmm. And so we can get frustrated by that. Or we can say, this is the voice of the customer. This is what they're looking for. This is that, like mobile service, an opportunity for us to step into a new space and retain more of the customer's business.
Stacey, what about any tips or things that you would like to leave our dealers with to think about? And Pamela, I'm going to go to you too, so I'll give you a second to think about that. But do you have any tip or something that you would really like? One thing for our CEM dealers to consider when they're embracing the questions and working with their coach.
Pamela hit it on the nail on the head. Communication is the biggest thing, but it starts from within. It's like how you feel and present yourself. There are lots of reasons not to be so happy, about certain things, but at the end of the day, you've got a fresh start with every single person that walks in. You've got the same abilities internally with your own employee coworkers, and so I think that's probably the biggest key, is that communication isn't that difficult, even if it's short, but you're doing something, and something keeps them connected to the bigger piece. And once you get a comfort level, even if you're an introvert, once you get a comfort level, you will now expand and you will share what is needed without clutter.
That's wonderful advice. Pamela, would you like to add or share your thoughts?
Yeah, I would say learn to ask open-ended questions. When you look at the results, when you look particularly at the verbatims, and you want to have a conversation with a specific, team member or the whole team, ask open-ended questions, and questions that are focused on the now, not on the past. So, what could we do here that would have created a better response? How could we have been non-defensive in our communications? Where did we need to take this? What was the next step? The other question, not why. Why makes everyone defensive and it puts them in the past. So we want really those, as we call them, discovery, learning, curious questions, because it's curious about how we can improve. So if we ask those open questions and we ask them of team members, then we learn what's getting in the way that we might need to do something about. We may be asking a team member to create a result for a customer that there's actually something keeping them from doing that, or making it less effective than it could have been if they'd had.
Oh, that's fantastic. So Stacey, you mentioned communication being key, and Pamela, you mentioned the open-ended question, and I feel like they go hand in hand together to create a great opportunity for our stores. It's been a fantastic, awesome pleasure to spend the time, Stacey and Pamela, with you talking about a CVP, getting some insights into what's coming, some of the trends that you both noticed, and then how you're both supporting our CEM dealers in really paying attention to the voice of the customer, as well as, the voice of the employee. What's happening in the store drives much of the experience that our customers have. So thank you for spending time with me today, and I look forward to having more conversations in the very near future with both of you.
Thank you.
Thank you for inviting me.